What's up, everybody? So if you found this video, you might be thinking about moving to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Now, Fort Lauderdale is an amazing place to live, but just like everywhere else, it's got its negatives, it's got its drawbacks. So in this video, I'm going to go over my top pros and cons of living in Fort Lauderdale. Okay, so before we dive in, if you're looking for a channel that goes over how to eat, sleep, live, work, play, and buy real estate in Fort Lauderdale, make sure you hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell to be updated with new videos weekly. Also, if you're thinking of making a move to Fort Lauderdale or anywhere in South Florida, feel free to give me a call, shoot me a text, or book a call with me, and I got your back. All right, so with that, let's get into some pros and cons. So this video is not going to be your typical, oh, the weather's beautiful, pros and cons video. This is going to be from my experience living down here, and I have some notes, but I'm kind of going off the top of my head. So with that, the first pro is going to be the location and the lifestyle. So for being a pretty big city, Fort Lauderdale is actually pretty relaxed. The lifestyle is pretty relaxed, and the location is great, being that it's halfway in between Miami, West Palm Beach. It's about 3 hours to Orlando, 45 minutes to the Everglades, an hour and a half to the Keys, and about 2.5 to 3 hours to Key West. So it makes it a really popular destination just because it's central location to everything in Florida. Now, Fort Lauderdale is also very culturally diverse. There's a ton of shopping. There's a lot of nightlife, but it's not overwhelming like Miami could be. So the nightlife includes, you got the Las Olas Strip, you got Fort Lauderdale Beach, then you have Hollywood, where you have the Hollywood Beach Boardwalk, the Hard Rock Cafe. In Fort Lauderdale, again, you got the Himmershey District, which is more of like a bar scene with some clubs, which is kind of tucked away. It's not right in the middle of downtown, so that's nice. I mean, I can keep going, but you get the point. Also, if you're a foodie, you're gonna love Fort Lauderdale because the food is really good down here. There's actually over 4,000 restaurants that operate in the city, so there's really something for everybody. Now, one thing that I like is being that the lifestyle allows it. Let's say you want to go to brunch on a Sunday, you could pull up your boat to Shooters, which is a waterfront restaurant on the Intercoastal, dock your boat, get off, have brunch, get back on your boat, and leave and do whatever you want for the rest of the day. So I kind of like this because coming from New Jersey, we didn't really have this type of lifestyle. Yes, there was places where you can pull your boat up and eat, but what, for 3 months out of the year? This is something you can do year round down here. Okay, and speaking of boats and waters, the next pro is gonna be access to waterways. So they don't call Fort Lauderdale the Venice of America and the yachting capital of the world for nothing. This is because there's over 300 miles of canals and waterways in the greater Fort Lauderdale area, with about 165 of them being in the city alone. This makes it a popular destination for boaters, yachters, even people who just enjoy water sports such as kayaking and paddleboarding. There's a ton of rivers and lakes, so there's really something for everybody when it comes to the water. It's also home to the world's largest on-water boat show, which brings in about 100,000 people a year. That just passed in October. That's the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show, so that happens once a year. And yeah, like I said, if you enjoy water sports or anything on the water, you're really gonna love Fort Lauderdale. Okay, so the next pro is it's a very pet-friendly city. So this was a little bit of a culture shock at first, because when I say pet-friendly, I mean it's pet-friendly. I mean, you can go food shopping, you'll see people walking their dogs around the grocery store, Walgreens, restaurants. I mean, I haven't had any bad experiences yet. I kind of like it, the fact that people can bring their dogs anywhere. However, maybe it's not for everybody, but that is a pro in my opinion. There's also over 20 dog parks in Fort Lauderdale, and that's including the beach. So there's the Canine Beach, which is just north of Fort Lauderdale Beach. And then there's also Snyder Park, which has a swimming pool for dogs. So if you're an avid dog person, Fort Lauderdale is probably a great place as it's very pet friendly. Okay, moving along, the next pro is the economy and the growth of the city. So Florida's always been a state that thrives off of tourism and the service industry. However, in the last few years alone, we've seen a ton of new companies bring their headquarters down here, and a lot of new finance, tech, and startup jobs. So I'm gonna link an article below. Fort Lauderdale is poised for unprecedented growth, and by 2030, they're expecting the landscape of this city to be completely different. You know, the outlook calls for more than 20 new urban core developments, which is gonna feature 13,000 residential units, 600,000 square feet of shopping and dining, over 1 million square feet of office space, and 1,000 new hotel rooms. This is just in the next 10 years. So to provide a reference point, in 2015, there was over 17,000 square feet of commercial development under construction in downtown Fort Lauderdale. And 5 years later, that number reached over 300,000. That's a 2,000% increase. The downtown population has grown by 41% over the last 10 years. And just between 2018 and 2020, downtown Fort Lauderdale witnessed a 33% surge in finance jobs, 16% increase in professional service jobs, and a 10% hike in tech jobs. So just in the 3.5 years that I've been here, I've seen this city grow incredibly. I can't imagine what the next 10 years is gonna bring. Even Elon Musk has examined the idea of bringing his company, the Boring Company, to Fort Lauderdale, creating an underground tunnel from downtown Fort Lauderdale out to the beach. So that's pretty interesting too. So we'll see what happens, but the growth has been crazy since I've been here, and they're expecting it to just get even crazier in the next 10 years. All right, so on to the next pro. It's no state income tax. Now this is a big deal for a lot of people, and it's a pretty good sales pitch that Florida has going to get people to move down here. You know, a majority of the people that benefit off this is retirees, people living off their investments, people who got a job transfer, or people who are working remote and they still have a job elsewhere, but they just live down here. A lot of people who come down here and try to find a new job, sometimes they're in for a rude awakening, which brings me to my first con, which is the salaries are lower compared to other places down here. You really have to factor this in when you're thinking about moving here. If you're not careful when planning your move and you're just factoring in that you're not going to be paying state income tax, well, you could actually be losing money if you take a hit on salary. So there's a good website called payscale.com, and you can go there and there's a cost of living calculator where you can plug in your salary for where you're living now, and it'll tell you what you need to make down here to maintain that same lifestyle that you were making in your previous home. So like I said, it's great that there's no state income tax. However, the salaries are considerably lower here compared to some other places. So just do your research before moving down here. Don't come down here without a plan. Okay, my next con, I know I said I wasn't gonna talk about the weather. However, I said I wasn't gonna talk about the weather as a pro. The weather can be a con down here. I'm specifically talking about the summertime. Summers are brutal. It's hot, it's humid, it's sticky, it rains every single day. I mean, depending on where you live, this might not be a big deal. If you live in like North Dakota or Canada or something where it's like 20 below zero. However, it's hot out here, brutally hot. The temperatures typically in the summer are in the high 80s, but with humidity, they're over 100. And don't rely on your weather app when you're, want to check what the weather is for the day, because it could tell you that it's going to be sunny all day, but it's going to rain. Guaranteed, it's going to rain almost every single day. And if you've been here for one of our summer rainstorms, you know what I'm talking about. It's torrential. Again, it's all about perspective. So if you're coming from somewhere where it snows a lot and gets 20 below zero, this might be nothing to you, but it's definitely a little bit of a con, as in the summertime, you can't do some of the things that you would normally like to do. Okay, so the next con is gonna be tourism and congestion. So summertime here is typically our dead season. This is when people, don't really travel down here as much because of the weather. And our peak season starts right around now, typically around Thanksgiving, and goes until mid-April. Okay, this is when all the snowbirds come down here to escape the cold. And spring break is kind of towards the end of our season, which if you know Fort Lauderdale and spring break, it gets out of control. It pretty much lasts the whole month of March. I think last year there was over 13 million people alone that traveled down here. So the tourism down here and just the congestion, it gets pretty out of control. But a pro of that is if you don't live down here full time, but you own property down here, you can make good money renting out your property during the high season. And piggybacking off of the congestion, the traffic down here is a nightmare. So there's really not too many highways down here. If you're coming from somewhere like California, LA, or San Francisco, New York, North Jersey, you're probably used to having a highway within 5 minutes of you. So out here, there's really only 4 major highways in the Fort Lauderdale area, which is I-95, which is our main highway that runs north and south. Then you got the Turnpike, which costs money to drive on. Then you got the Sawgrass Expressway, which is further out towards the Everglades. That also costs money to drive on. Then you have 595, which starts at 95 near the airport and pretty much goes out to the Everglades. So there's really not a ton of options for highways. This can make the back roads get pretty congested. There doesn't really feel like there's a rush hour down here. It's just, there's like traffic all the time. And speaking of traffic, the drivers down here, terrible, all right? I'm not sugarcoating it. I'm gonna be honest, because if you're thinking about moving down here, you should know the drivers down here are out of control, okay? I came from North Jersey, New York City area where I thought people drove aggressive. It's a completely different ballgame down here. Again, I'm being transparent. There's a ton of accidents. I've been in 2 hit and runs in the 3 years that I've lived here. Never been in an accident in my life until I moved down here. I don't know if it's because we're in a melting pot with a bunch of different personality types, people driving all different ways. It's definitely a big con. I hate getting on the highway down here. It is what it is. So think about that before you come down here because it is a big deal to me. Okay, the next con is gonna be the cost of living. So Fort Lauderdale is about 24% higher than the average cost of living, and housing affordability is not cheap. Rent is averaged around $2,000 a month, and housing is about 60% higher than the national average. But again, it's all about perspective. If you come from somewhere like San Francisco, this might not be anything to you. If you come from New York City, you're gonna get a lot more house for your money down here, and it's just a better quality of life. However, it is not cheap to live down here. I escaped North Jersey because it was very expensive to live up there. 2 years after I moved down here, it pretty much caught up. The good thing is that property taxes are a lot lower down here, so there's that advantage. And if you compare it to a place like New York City, the cost of living is about 50% lower here, and the cost of housing is about 70% lower. Okay, another con, this one's gonna be short, parking is not free. It might not be a big deal, but in Fort Lauderdale, you gotta pay to park everywhere, at least when you're in the city. If you're going somewhere like a shopping plaza or a strip mall or a mall, obviously there's parking lots. But if you're in the city or going to the beach, you always got to pay to park, no matter what. It could be $10 for a couple hours. It starts to add up, especially if you work downtown and you have a car, it adds up. So again, if you're coming from Jersey, I remember you had to pay to use the beach out there. You have to pay for the wristband, which is about $10. At least that was 3 years ago, last time I went to the shore out there. So that's a bonus. You don't have to pay to use the beach out here. However, you still do have to pay to park. Okay, so at this point, I just gave you my top 10 pros and cons. If you still decide that Fort Lauderdale might be the right place for you, watch the video that pops up next, and we'll see you on the next one.